Hi, my name is Andy. I went to the University of Waterloo in 2008, and I graduated in 2013 from the Computing and Financial Management program. I would say I had a bit of a different story. In my first year, I played a lot of computer games and almost flunked school. Fortunately, passed all my courses. The second year, really found out what I wanted to do and went after it, which was investment banking. So I've done a lot of conferences, competitions, was part of the school's investment fund, and did a lot of co-op experiences all across the financial services industry, and eventually landed in investment banking. So I graduated in 2013 and worked at CIBC Investment Banking for 3 years in the Mergers and Acquisitions group. And recently, earlier this year, I just quit and went over to Canada Pension Board Investment Plan, where I'm looking at principal credit investments.
Hi, I'm Lynn Wilson. I work with Ernst & Young. I'm the Director of Learning for the Canadian office. I graduated from the math program in the 80s, and I worked as an auditor for 8 years. Then I moved into our learning team in Canada, and I spent 10 years there and shifted focus to work in leadership development and organizational effectiveness. I did that for 15 years, and I was seconded to our Global Leadership Institute, as well as worked in the global diversity space. 3 years ago, I came back to the learning team, and I manage a 27-person team in Canada.
Hi, my name is Vikram, and I graduated from the Math CA program in 2010 and did the Masters of Accounting program in 2011. After I graduated, I went into management consulting at what is now Monitor Deloitte, and 3 years ago, I left that to start my own company in education technology, and 3 months ago, I made a decision to wind that company down because we couldn't scale, and now I'm on to my next company, which is a rideshare company based on technology. So you open up your app, you find the nearest bike, hop on, and for $1 a ride, you can ride anywhere in the city. And within the next 2 months, we'll be launching 10,000 bikes across Canada.
Hi, my name's Chester Dawes. My current position is at Manulife Asset Management. I'm on the asset management, not the insurance side, and my position is the Vice President of Global Finance Transformation and Chief Transformation Officer for Manulife Asset Management. Prior to that, after university, I went to Deloitte. I went to Husky Injection Molding. I went to Brookfield. And then most recently, before Manulife, I helped to build up the second largest private equity firm in Canada, where I was the CFO for 8 years there.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's
Do you want to say anything about working overseas?
I should probably say that.
yeah. So
Also like to mention that I've had the privilege of working in London, Luxembourg, Paris. Luxembourg's an interesting one because I didn't know it existed, and then I ended up living there for 3 years. Also worked in Hong Kong, Singapore, and Shanghai. Over there I had the opportunity to visit many countries. So I've had exposure to different cultures, different people, different ways of working, different philosophies, and all that I feel has made me a better leader overall.
So thank you very much for coming today. I really appreciate your taking the time. We're going to try and talk to, or have you talk to our students about the importance of people skills and what it has meant to you and to your careers, and to how it has impacted on both the successes and the failures that you may have encountered throughout your career. I'll be asking you a series of questions and looking forward to getting your input. Shall we start, Chester?
I think if you don't have the people skills, you're going to put a very quick ceiling on your career. It's going to be limited. With those people skills, you'll be able to progress faster. You'll be able to see things coming around the corner. You'll enjoy your work-life balance a lot more. You'll enjoy showing up. You spend more time at work than you do at home sometimes. So it's going to reward you that way as well.
Wonderful. Lynn?
I'd echo what Chester said. I think it'll have an impact on your growth, your opportunities, and your enjoyment of work. So you'll be a much happier person in your career if you have a full set of skills.
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah, I think the problem is not that people are not aware that people's skills are important. It's just people feel the lack and the lack of need to develop it further, especially within our university. And I think a good analogy would be, you know, let's say you're trying to understand a lot of stuff, but you're only connected to your own internet or your own books within your own household, whereas you don't have access to the World Wide Web. You know, I think that's an analogy where you're not communicating, you're not adapting, you're not learning and improving on feedback. It still works, but you could do a lot better. And that's directly applicable in the workplace.
I think you made a really good point that you have to learn and adapt over time. You don't just gain these all at once and then you're good to go. It's learning forever and adapting.
And people change. Right? The person you are when you're 15, 19, 25 is vastly different from most people by the time you're 60, 70. It's completely different because you're always changing and adapting. So to me, I think a big reason is when you solve complex problems, you get paid, and that's like you advance your career. And the most complexity is with people. The technical stuff can get super complex, but you can learn it. And complexity from people will never go away, and because everyone's changing all the time, you have to be always on and always working on people's skills. Otherwise, you will just become irrelevant. And especially now with automation looming for everything, especially anything technical, will start to get more and more automated. And people's skills are the things that can't be automated anytime soon. And so that's like, it's critically important for you to keep improving your people's skills. Otherwise.
Excellent, Vikram. And you went through the math program.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit about how, because the math program didn't spend very much time on people skills.
Right.
How did you learn your people skills?
It's a great question. I would say trial and error, making mistakes. I think I did a few things wrong, and then you learn, and like Lynn said, you get feedback from people, and Lynn and Andy, you get feedback, you learn, and then you improve, and you're always kind of constantly looking on how you can keep getting better at people's skills. So.
Did you learn it in your courses, or did you learn it on the job?
On the job. I was a big believer in most of the valuable skills. Knowledge is learned in courses, skills are learned outside. So I did a lot of extracurricular things, tried a lot of things. I was always kind of entrepreneurial in the sense that I didn't care for what is conventional. I just did what I thought needed to get done. And so I made a lot of mistakes and made a fool of myself sometimes, but that's where you have the biggest learning, is when you challenge yourself and go out of bounds a little bit. And to me, that's kind of how I picked up some skills as I went.
And I think
this is a little off script, but do you think a grounding of some of the theories and some of the knowledge would have helped in understanding how those mistakes occurred or how the successes were developed?
Absolutely. I think I sometimes underestimated the technical knowledge or the grounding, like you said, and so that would have avoided a lot of mistakes. But then there's some things you just learn as you go, because until you make the mistakes, they don't stick. So there's a definite balance, but you have to definitely have some kind of grounding.
Excellent. Lynn,
and the teamwork in courses is a great place to practice these skills.
Yeah.
So learning concepts and then applying it when you're working with people in teams, and taking time to debrief, I think, rather than just rushing on to the next thing, is helpful, because then you're getting the feedback at the right time.
Good. Andy, your experiences in developing your people skills.
Yeah, for sure. So just to add to Vikram, I actually did half a degree in computer science. So that side for me was actually more severe, because you never get group projects. It's always, here are 10 assignments throughout the term. If you're really smart, you don't need to go to classes. You finish their assignments. You don't even show up. The prof doesn't even know who you are. You finish it, and then that's about it. And I think for me, in order to develop skills under those circumstances, it was really in order to take a lot of initiative with an open mind. So for me, I went to a lot of conferences, competitions on both the technology and the finance side, just meeting up with people and then co-emailing people for coffee just to understand what they do. And obviously I made a lot of mistakes at the time. I didn't know what I was doing, But it was the open feedback, the open communication, knowing what was good, what worked, and knowing what didn't work, what should be changed and improved. That was really helpful for me.
Wonderful. Lynn, you've had personal experiences, but also in your role, you've had to look at how others are developing and the things that they're learning in the firm and how they're developing. Could you comment on those?
I think one of the biggest opportunities we gave people to grow was when we provided anonymous feedback. So you get a report at the end of this window when anybody in the organization can comment on how you help people grow and foster a positive work environment. And you get your report back and you skip over the positive because that's your nature, and you move immediately to the negative and you get defensive. And what we would encourage people to do is to actually focus on the positive, because you can leverage those strengths, and then stop and take a time out before you ask, well, who said that and why did they say that? And you get all defensive and say, what can I learn from this? So we have a saying at the firm, and that is that feedback is a gift. And the minute you can shift your mind to see it as a very wonderful thing as opposed to bad, and you need to fix things, then you're in a whole different space.
Okay, thank you. Chester, you commented on living in various places, and so you've had some great successes, I would think, in terms of dealing with people of different cultures and backgrounds.
And I'd say some of my skills came from, you know, something as simple as umpiring baseball, from dealing with people. At university, I ran the swimming pool. I worked at bomb shelter and Fed Hall, so you're dealing with all sorts of people in different situations. At work, it's I've had the pleasure of working on different continents with different people, different cultures. The people skills really, come in handy where you go places where I was in Singapore, where it's at the time was 1% unemployment. If someone doesn't like what you say, they're going to walk across the street and have another job by lunchtime. So you really have to get people on the same table, use your people skills to get people working together towards a common goal. It's not necessarily what you know. Yes, you need the technical knowledge, the foundation. I don't know if I had a full appreciation for that at university. I thought, yes, if you got those technical skills, great, you're going to do well in your career, you got high marks. Well, no, you need those people skills on top of that to get everybody working on the same team so that you can be successful in your career.
Excellent, wonderful. You sort of covered some of my last question about how you went through things. So what I'd like to ask you now, to each of you to say, take a few minutes to talk to the students, and what advice, knowing where you are now and looking back when you were in university, and Chester, you started this and it sort of twigged in my mind, that when you were there, you were doing some things and you were learning from them, and Vikram, you've commented about how there have been occasions where you've learned things and made mistakes and picked up on them. But now, if you go back to, you've done your first work term,
Yeah.
and you're getting exposed to some of the theories and ideas, why do you want to know about this stuff? What do you want to tell the students, our students, that they've had one work term and they've just joined into organizational behavior as a class? What advice would you give them?
I'd probably say pay attention, because there's a couple things I've definitely kicking myself about later. I'm like, oh, that's what they're talking about. And this stuff does matter. And you go into these organizations, and some of them are very progressive, and you'll hear the same thing that you did in school. So you can either learn it in school or you can learn it later, but regardless, you're going to have to learn it anyway.
Good, excellent. Gwen?
I would say be curious, so don't take everything at face value. Figure out how it fits for you and the particular environment that you anticipate you want to be in, whether that's going back to the same work term or a different environment, like Vikram, who's done some very entrepreneurial things. Figure out what's going to be important to you and then be curious about those things.
So one of the things I want you to bear in mind is that we're dealing with students who have had one work term. They've just come back from their very first work term and are getting into a different subject area in terms of organizational behavior.
In hindsight, what I would say is a lot of things you learn in organizational behavior might seem very theoretical and kind of technical, especially principles around why organizations are structured certain ways, power dynamics, things like that. But put yourself in the shoes of people designing those organizations. You've been through a co-op term, so you have real work experience. You've seen kind of how your performance gets evaluated, right? So question, why did that happen? Question, empathy is a really powerful tool. Just put yourself in the shoes of your manager. Put yourself in the shoes of the managing director of the firm. Put yourself in the shoes of whoever the leaders are, and think about how you might have structured those, performance management, for example, differently. And then you really start to get value out of understanding those dynamics, because now you're questioning and exploring things you've never done before. Traditionally, we're used to, throughout high school and university, just this is the curriculum, you're going to go through it, hit certain benchmarks, and you get graded on that. This is a real opportunity, especially at Waterloo when you do the work term theoretical balance. It's phenomenal. That's the thing that stretched me the most in my career. You get to tie everything in together, and organizational behavior really it adds value when you can understand, having been through it, why those kinds of things are happening.
Wonderful.
And I'd expand on that, where when I was in school, I wanted to become an accountant. I wanted to work for one of the big 8 at the time. So I wanted to become an accountant. So why should I pay attention to organizational behavior? Didn't think it was important, didn't think it mattered. Maybe I was dozing off a little bit in class there. Now I come out and I figure out just how many billions of dollars organizations spend exactly on this topic, trying to get it out, figure it out and get it right, so that they can be more successful.
Wonderful. Excellent. Lynn?
When you say billions of dollars, we've tied it to improved revenue, improved margins, greater client loyalty, and higher retention. All of these sophisticated people skills. And I loved what you said about empathy, and the way I would ask you to think about it in class is, have you thought about how people feel after you've interacted with them? And we call that your emotional wake. So imagine a motorboat goes by when you're in the water, and after it's gone, there's this ripple effect, and that's how you're left feeling. So imagine how your boss impacts you and how you are left feeling, and how you impact your teammates or others, and how you leave them. So I think empathy is very much your emotional wake.
Especially because it's behind you and it's such a blind spot if you don't spend time thinking about it. That's a great analogy, yeah.
Excellent. But cultures really are seen inside companies, and even if you were at the same company the full time, there would be different cultures. Could you explain to me and give me some ideas of how you've had to deal with different cultural elements, either across nations or within the same firm or with different firms?
Different organizations react different ways, and what worked for me in North America didn't necessarily work all the time in Europe or in Asia. So you had to tailor and just reflect what the reaction is, and then adjust your approach and to recognize that that organization or culture is different.
And if you're not receptive to how you're being received or feedback you're getting, then you can't adapt. So if you're shutting down, then you're losing the power of the concepts and the real-time feedback.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can I take a moment and define culture in simple
Yes.
terms? We struggled with having a shared understanding of what culture was, so we have defined it as what is recognized, rewarded, and reinforced. So that can be within an organization, it can be within a country, and so on.
Excellent. Excellent. So Chester's given us some examples by going in different countries, and it becomes really obvious. But if you can reflect and think yourselves about, how you've had to adapt. And Chester, you can maybe start off because you've done it by nation, but also think about it in terms of Vikram, you're an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and boy, you have to adapt and
All
be
the time.
very right, and very responsive to the things, the pressures that are going on,
Right.
and the way that different people are acting with you. And so if we can expand on those areas, would be fantastic.
Yeah,
and
go ahead.
I mean, yeah, we talked about doing it by nation, whether in Europe or whether in Asia, but also within an organization. And best example I'd give, if you're in a company that makes widgets, and you go and talk with the engineers, there's going to be a certain reaction there. You talk to the people on the shop floor, there's going to be a certain reaction there. So you talk to the accountants, there's a kind of different reaction there. So you have to tailor your approach to those different, sort of, not cultural biases, but other biases in terms of, educational background, regional background. So it's, you always have to reflect on who your audience is and how to approach them effectively.
I have two extreme examples of when I bumped into this. The first one was when we had a vice chairman from the Americas up to a meeting with Canadian leadership. And at one point we were having a very intense conversation, and he said, okay, well, let's table that. And the Canadians thought tabling it meant we would go even deeper. He thought, or what he intended, was put it aside on a table, we'll talk about it at another time. So we finished the meeting, the Canadians are really happy, we've had a chance to hash it out, and he goes away, and I find out through one of my allies in the US that it was not a good meeting in his mind because we didn't table it. So that was once when I bumped into it, and it was just so obvious to me that I had to have a far deeper appreciation. And the other time was when I compared the feedback I would get when I participated in Canadian teams versus when I would participate in Americas and global teams. And in Canada, our standard was you asked questions, you piggybacked on each other's ideas, and you got to what we felt was a better end product. When you participate in Americas or global calls, the expectation, and it's unspoken, so you don't know the rules going in, is that you listen and you do what's asked. So it's more information sharing. So when I would ask questions, then they would be mystified, and there'd be all this back talk after the meeting about why the Canadian kept disrupting the meeting, thinking I was helping, and then in my anonymous feedback report, I'd get these alerts that, no, this wasn't constructive.
Yeah, culture is one of those things that is really hard to define. I really like Lynn's definition of, what's recognized, rewarded, and reinforced, and a great example from my experience. So when I first started the previous company I was working at, we went down to Silicon Valley. There were 4 of us, and we were going through an accelerator program. So we had some funding. We had, 6 months, and very traditional entrepreneurship story. We were 4 people living in a living room, sleeping there, working there at our desks, 18, 20-hour days nonstop. And part of the motivation was when you're in that environment, everyone's doing that. And the rest of our peers in the class of companies were all doing that. Every week we would have a dinner for all the companies, and it's everyone talking about what they've gotten done. Right? We are about to raise X amount of money. We're growing this fast. And that, again, what's recognized, what's rewarded, what's reinforced. And it creates this incentive system unconsciously, and you're forced to act like that. And then we came here, moved back to Canada because we wanted to be based in Toronto, and all of that was gone. And there's a stark shift. All of a sudden we found ourselves taking the foot off the gas. We are now hanging out with friends more often, bringing in work-life balance and social life. And we got a little complacent and moved too far on that side. And we grew to a team of 8, but we're getting almost done, the same amount done as we had with 4 people. And so we have to question, how do we change that tone? What are the things we do to put that incentive system in place to, again, go back to recognizing and rewarding and reinforcing the right kinds of things? So we experimented a whole bunch of different iterations of that, and finally landed on something that was kind of in between, where we're no longer in that fire pit, so to speak. We don't need to go that aggressively, but we still need to figure out a way to not be complacent and act fast. And so I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong in ways you don't expect when you change little things here and there. But again, to Andy's point, the self-awareness, understanding what's happening and acting on it is the important part.
Wonderful. Last chance of comments that you would like to make, again, to the students. What would you like them to know based on your experience and your life to date? Because you've ended up in very different places, and the 4 of you are a great panel for us in terms of the exposure that any of our students are looking at, saying, "Wow, I'd love to be doing,"
yeah.
Right? So, any sort of last thoughts, any last comments that you'd like to make to, again, and just make it to our students?
I think I always tell people the same kind of advice. So people who are going through early stages of university career or things like that. Again, going back to, there's a little bit of my entrepreneurial bias, and also what I've seen from my own experience, which is by the time you're at that point, first, second year university, you're just used to our system of rules, and you're doing, you have clear expectations, and you deliver on those expectations, you get rewarded. But the reality is, in life, no one knows what they're doing. Everyone's just making things up as they go. Rules are there, but they're kind of more like guidelines, unless they're laws, in which case, obviously don't break the law. But the thing to remember is, tying it back to organizational behavior, is that's an evolving thing. What we know about it today is vastly different from what we knew about it 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so it's not a system of rules that are firm. It's guidelines. Think about them, apply them to what you're learning, reflect on it, and grow with it. And then you'll get your own experiences to marry that with. But the important thing is to just keep questioning things and realize that people are making things up, and you're free to make things up too. Just test them, learn from them, and don't restrict yourself.
Wonderful. Thank you. Who would like to go next? There's no particular, there's
I'll
not
go
down the
next.
line. But
For me, I think it's hard to say, what really contributed to my success, but I would say a big portion of that has to do with people skills. For me, I think if I wasn't really brave enough to reach out to people, if I can't have a normal conversation with someone I just randomly met, and all kinds of things, I would say, even at the workplace, communicating with a coworker about a potential conflict, telling a client that, this deadline is, we're having trouble meeting, all those things would not have got me to where I am today. So I think that's really obviously said that people skills in both professional and personal perspective is very important. But I think the first part really is to understand why it is important, why you need to go after it. The second part is figuring out how to actually do it step by step. And the third part for me is actually the easiest, is just actually doing it day by day and reflecting on your feedback. So I hope this really helps in terms of the first part to all the students out there, that this is a very important skill, especially for someone who's done their first co-op term, their goals are trying to find out and learn what they want to do after they graduate and eventually land a job.
excellent. Thank you.
I found when I was graduating high school and trying to get into Waterloo that it was a very competitive setting, and that carried over into first year in the math program. I felt like we were competing against each other. And the shift, I would say, I made through my work terms and through my work experience is to stop being focused on competition and technical exclusively, and realize that if you can adopt a mindset of gratefulness, so gratitude for growth opportunities, gratitude for teamwork, and so on, and approach things from that optimistic perspective as opposed to simply competition and insular to yourself, that's a powerful shift. And the other came out of a trust course I took and learned the power of the word ally, and viewing everyone that you work with as a potential ally instead of just someone you were dependent on to get a work product in, but in fact someone you could team with and have mutual respect and fun and all of those things. So for me, gratefulness and ally were lessons I learned through co-op and through my career.
Wonderful. Excellent.
Great.
Chester.
I think if it were not for the people skills that I've been able to develop, I wouldn't be in the position that I am today. I think that originally when you start out, the technical skills are important, and then you might think that, oh yeah, technical skills are 90%, people skills are 10%. As you move up throughout an organization, that technical comes down to about 10%. It's more than 90% those people skills. Right now I have a team of about 60 people that I lead. I know if it weren't for the people skills, slowly that would go down over time, and if I didn't have the people skills, no one would want to work for me, and I can't do all the work myself. So it's about having that team together, working towards a common goal, keeping everybody happy, making sure people don't leave and find another job. If they're happy, they're going to stay in their job, and it's going to be rewarding for everyone. So it's vitally important that you have those people skills in addition to those technical skills as well.
So what I heard and what you said was the technical is baseline expectation, and the people skills are the differentiator.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. That's a good way of putting it. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for the time that you've taken to share your experiences, your ideas, and your thoughts. I think that they will be very valuable to our students in terms of they're looking at the program that they're about to go through with us in a slightly different way and understand the importance it has to their careers. Thank you again. Great. Thanks, everybody. Thank you very much.